Hello, third graders. I hope you are having a fantabulous day. We are continuing our study of the ancient Roman civilization, and we are on lesson 10, and we're going to learn about some new Roman leaders, some new Roman rulers. Augustus Caesar in the Roman Empire. That's funny. His name sounds similar to another Roman leader that we've learned about. I wonder why. Some vocabulary that you will hear throughout the read aloud. Illustrious. It's an adjective, so describe something. Famous, outstanding, well known because of one's accomplishments. Influence is the power to have a compelling or persuasive effect on people or things. My sister used her influence over Mom to persuade her to take us to the movies. Parched is extremely dry due to heat and lack of rain. During the drought, the land was so parched that no crops could grow. Predecessor is the person who held a position before the current position holder, predecessor. Vast is an adjective to describe something, which means it's very big in size, gigantic. The Pacific Ocean is so vast that when Victor went fishing, all he could see was water in all directions. So you learn about the life of Julius Caesar and how he worked to expand Rome's territory and laid the groundwork for changing the way Rome's government worked. As we've seen, Rome progressed from a king to a republic of senators and consuls to a dictator, right? Julius Caesar was a dictator. First, Rome and the surrounding areas were divided into many different kingdoms ruled by Etruscan kings. Then, after the people overthrew the Etruscan kings, Rome became a republic. Finally, when Julius Caesar ruled Rome, he ruled as a dictator, a person who was not elected and had ultimate control of the government. Excuse me. Today you'll hear more about the next step in the progression of Rome's government. Rome became an empire. An empire usually consists of an area of land that is larger than a kingdom. An empire's vast area of land consists of many different regions ruled by an emperor. So listen carefully to hear both of these terms, empire and emperor, in today's read aloud. During his life, Julius Caesar had a few close friends, the closest of which was Mark Antony. Mark Antony was a general under Julius Caesar and helped in the conquering of Gaul. Julius Caesar did not have any sons that could take over his position as emperor of Rome. In his will, Julius Caesar adopted his 18-year-old great-nephew, Octavian, as his own son. After Caesar's death, Mark Antony and Octavian worked together to fight against Julius Caesar's enemies and resolve some of the conflict in the empire, at least for a while. Alright, so here are some sculptures of Mark Antony and Octavian. If Mark Antony and Octavian worked together against those enemies, what did they form? They formed an alliance. During Julius Caesar's time, Rome's borders had expanded far beyond Italy and far beyond the coastlines of the Mediterranean Sea. By the time of Julius Caesar's death, Rome included a number of provinces or areas outside of the city of Rome controlled and governed by Roman generals. This map shows in orange and red all the lands that Rome controlled at the time of Julius Caesar's death. The generals in charge of these areas were supposed to take orders from the Roman Senate. Mark Antony took it upon himself to make sure Rome and Egypt continued to be allies, because Rome needed to keep importing Egypt's wheat. Plus, Cleopatra's Egypt was a rich and powerful country with a strong army. Not as powerful as Rome, but still an important force in the Mediterranean area with which to have an alliance. Just as Julius Caesar had done, Mark Antony fell in love with Cleopatra, and she fell in love with him. In fact, they became one of the most famous couples in history. William Shakespeare, the playwright you heard about earlier who wrote the play Julius Caesar, wrote a play about this couple titled Antony and Cleopatra. Mark Antony and Cleopatra became allies in a struggle for power with Octavian. Even though Mark Antony and Octavian had worked together in an alliance to end Rome's civil war, they eventually became enemies. It seemed like this is the way things always turned out in Roman politics, isn't it? Since the beginning of Roman history, starting with Romulus and Remus, right on through Julius Caesar and Brutus and beyond, allies often became bitter enemies. What person have you heard about who had a loyal ally that eventually became an enemy? That's right, Romulus and Remus, Julius Caesar and Brutus. Man, not cool. You gotta choose your friends carefully. Octavian won the war against Mark Antony and Cleopatra. He went on to become the most powerful Roman leader at the time, with influence over most of the senators and generals. Octavian served as consul, proconsul, and a number of other important roles, becoming a true Roman war hero, just like his predecessor, Julius Caesar. Octavian managed to make more friends than enemies, unlike Julius Caesar. He was so popular and powerful that the Senate gave him a new name, Augustus, which in Latin means illustrious one. Augustus Caesar was presented the same award as his predecessor for his bravery, the Civic Crown. Today, Augustus is remembered as Emperor Augustus Caesar. He took the name Caesar in honor of Julius Caesar, his predecessor and adoptive father. Augustus Caesar was considered the first Roman emperor, which means he had a lot of power and influence over Roman politics. Under his leadership, Rome was no longer called the Roman Republic. Instead, from the time of Emperor Augustus Caesar onward, it would be called the Roman Empire. If you have influence over something, you have a powerful effect on how people think or act. You can have both a positive or negative influence on someone or something. Look at this illustration of Augustus Caesar. He looks tough. Illustrious means famous and well known. Remember, a republic has citizens who elect officials who then make decisions for the public, whereas an empire has one leader who is not elected and does not need systems like checks and balances to pass laws. What the emperor says goes. Whether he was called a consul, dictator, king, or emperor did not matter. The fact was that Augustus Caesar was the most powerful man in Rome. Many soldiers and generals throughout most of Rome's provinces were loyal to Augustus Caesar. They respected him and would do anything for him. This alone gave Augustus Caesar great power. He was also incredibly rich, and he had the power to make other people incredibly rich if they would do what he wanted them to do. Under the Roman Empire, the basic structure of government was similar to the structure of the Roman Republic. There was a Senate with 2 consuls, as well as proconsuls or governors, and many of the same laws. The emperor of the Roman Empire was most powerful. During his first several years as emperor, Augustus Caesar worked to make Rome's borders and provinces secure and safe from attack. The Roman Empire was huge, stretching over thousands of miles, including large cities, vast forests, mighty mountains, and parched deserts. The land of Gaul had been conquered, but there were still tribes in the deep forest determined to fight the Romans that called them barbarians. To the north of Gaul, there were countless other Germanic tribes that were angry and nervous that Rome would try to take their land next. In the Alps, just north of Italy, there were still many ancient tribes unwilling to submit to Roman rule. There were also enemies in Spain and throughout various parts of Africa and Western Asia. Individually, none of these enemies were a real threat to Roman power, but all together they posed a real problem. It seemed as though the wars and fighting would never end. Augustus Caesar wanted to put an end to the continuous warfare once and for all. He spent more than 20 years fighting these enemies of Rome and expanded Roman territory to reduce the amount of surrounding threats. Thus began an important 200-year period in Roman history known as the Pax Romana, which means Roman peace in Latin. In truth, things weren't entirely peaceful. Roman armies still had to do some fighting here and there, but there were no serious threats to Roman power. Augustus Caesar preferred to win wars without fighting at all, and many enemies surrendered to Roman rule rather than face Roman legions in battle. The mere thought of fighting the Romans was enough to make most kings shudder with fear. Why do you think people feared the Roman legions? Because they were really tough and brutal and really well trained. Wherever they conquered, the Romans built their roads, bridges, temples, aqueducts, and fortresses. All of these are considered to be engineering feats. More roads were built under Emperor Augustus Caesar than any other ruler. Wherever they went, the Romans also brought their language, laws, money, and art. Augustus Caesar loved art, and he knew how important it was to all Romans. He paid artists to create some of the finest and most beautiful sculptures, mosaics, frescoes, and temples. There are fewer frescoes today because they have not held up as well as mosaics and sculptures over time. Frescoes and other art from ancient Rome show us that Romans were talented artists. Ancient Roman art provided important clues about daily Roman life. For example, we can see what type of clothing Romans wore. Can you think of a few other things art would provide clues for? Well, we could see what their families look like, how they did their daily lives. In one of these pictures, you can see that it looks like they might have had some pets. You can see in this corner one that there might be a dog under the table, right? You could see what they eat, and for sure what they wear. A lot of different things you can see from the art that's been left behind. Augustus Caesar convinced Romans that peace was better than war. This idea was difficult for many Romans to accept at first because they were used to constant warfare and expansion as the way to sustain the Roman Empire. Roman boys were expected to join the army as adults, and when necessary, die in battle for Rome. Roman mothers, wives, and children expected their sons, husbands, and fathers to march away to wars, often never to return. The idea of Pax Romana was something most Romans had never even dreamed of. Over the next hundreds of years, the Roman Empire had many, many emperors, but none would ever be as powerful or as illustrious as Augustus Caesar. If Augustus Caesar helped bring about the Pax Romana, or 200-year period of peace in the Roman Empire, do you think he had a positive influence or negative influence over Rome? Who took it upon himself to continue the alliance with Queen Cleopatra of Egypt? That's right, Mark Antony. What happened when he met Cleopatra? He fell in love with her, just like Julius Caesar did, and she actually fell in love with Mark Antony. How was Octavian different from Julius Caesar? Octavian made more friends than enemies, and he wanted peace in Rome, whereas Julius Caesar wanted to fight and conquer. How was Octavian similar to Julius Caesar? Octavian served as consul, proconsul, and in a number of important roles, became a true Roman war hero just like his predecessor. He received the civic crown like Julius Caesar. He was wealthy and powerful. You tilt your head to see this statue. When Octavian became the most powerful man in Rome, what was his name changed to? Emperor Augustus Caesar. How did Augustus Caesar receive part of the same name as Julius Caesar? Well, he was Julius Caesar's adopted son, and he was actually his nephew, and he decided to take his adopted father's name. What were some reasons that Augustus Caesar was the most powerful man in Rome? He was the emperor. Many soldiers and generals were loyal to him. Many people respected him. He was rich, could make those who were loyal to him rich. His name, Augustus, means illustrious one and one who is famous. What does the Latin term Pax Romana mean? Roman peace, a 200-year period of peace in Rome. In order to create the Pax Romana, what did Augustus Caesar believe he had to accomplish first? He had to conquer the lands around the Roman Empire at the time to lessen the amount of surrounding threats to Rome. How does ancient Roman art give us clues today about Roman daily life? It shows their culture, how ancient Romans dressed, what they ate, what they did, where they lived, the tools they used, their part in important events in history, and so much more. Why was the Pax Romana such a big change for a lot of Romans? How did it change the Roman way of life? For so long, war was a constant part of Roman life. Boys were expected to join the army as adults, and women were used to having their sons and husbands go off to war and possibly not come back. The big change was learning to live peacefully and to not have to fight to expand Rome. There's more time to focus on the arts during the Pax Romana. What is this text feature called? Look at the key, right? This text feature is called a map. Now look at the key. What does the red part of the map represent? That's right, the red part of the map represents the Roman territory under Augustus. Our word for today is influence. In the read aloud you heard about Octavian, he went on to become the most powerful Roman leader with influence over most of the senators and generals. Say the word influence. Influence is the power to have a compelling effect on people or things. In the Republic of the United States, politicians use their powerful influence to get elected by the people. You may have influence over other people, right? If you are a big brother or a big sister, you may influence your little siblings. You may find that your little sister wants to do the same things you do, or your little brother wants to have the same type of cereal you do. Well, if someone wants to be like you have an influence over them. All right? So people can either be a good influence or a bad influence. What kind of influence are you going to be? Think about your actions and how other people watch you and the influence you have.